Welcome to conference and to Bright Blue's third event today, titled Greener Gas, the Role of Hydrogen in Our Net Zero.
Use the microphone,
please. Is that better? There we go. Thank you very much. My name is Alexandra Jezeph. I'm on the board of Bright Blue, an independent think tank and pressure group for liberal conservatism. It has 7 major research themes covering bountiful economy, clean environment, good lives, rewarding work, empowering government, just institutions and connected communities. In hosting this event, we're very pleased to be partnering with Cadent Gas, the largest gas distribution network in the UK. A couple of housekeeping points before we kick off. The event is being recorded and also live streamed via the Conservative Party's digital platform. So a warm welcome to our online audience. And if you're on Twitter, please do use hashtag BrightBlue and hashtag CPC21. And the Twitter handles are at WeAreBrightBlue and at Cadent Gas Limited. That's LTD at the end. So today, most of us remain reliant on gas to heat our homes and businesses, with 85% of households using gas central heating. Heating, cooking and industrial processes alone account for 37% of the UK's CO2 emissions. Therefore, switching from gas, which releases CO2, to hydrogen, which produces wastewater, would significantly reduce the country's greenhouse gas emissions. In August this year, the government published its long-awaited UK hydrogen strategy, setting out a plan for 5 gigawatts of low-carbon hydrogen production by 2030 to replace natural gas, empowering around 3 million homes, as well as industry and transport. It follows the Transport Decarbonisation Plan, published in March also this year, which promotes hydrogen as a more sustainable fuel. That all sounds very positive. However, the vast majority of the UK's hydrogen supply is produced using fossil fuels. And we are also debating this in the midst of an energy pricing crisis and also a petrol supply and distribution crisis. So what more can we do to green our hydrogen supply and improve our energy security? So this afternoon's debate will examine the future role of hydrogen in meeting our net zero commitments and consider a number of questions, including what are the economic opportunities for levelling up that are associated with expanding the UK's hydrogen economy? How can the UK foster greater uptake of hydrogen heating in homes? What role should hydrogen play in decarbonisation of transport? How can hydrogen clusters be scaled up across the UK? And how can carbon capture and storage be scaled up for large-scale production of hydrogen? So we are delighted to have 4 panellists joining us to debate these important questions. We have Alex Stafford, MP, so MP for Rother Valley and a member of the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Committee. Dr. Michaela Kendall, who is Chief Executive of Adelan. Amer Gaffar, who is Director of Manchester Fuel Cell Innovation Centre. And we have Richard Walsh, who is Head of External Affairs at Cadent Gas Limited. So we've got just over an hour to cover a lot of ground, so I'll invite Alex to kick off the discussion. Alex.
Thank you very much. And can you all hear me with the microphone? Excellent. So my name's Adelan Stafford. I'm Member of Parliament for Rother Valley, the first ever Conservative for Rother Valley. For those who don't know, that's in South Yorkshire. It's a pleasure to be here. But before I became Member of Parliament, I used to work for WWF and then Shell. So both sides of the coin when it comes to environmental movement. So this is something quite passionate and close to my heart. I'm also vice chair of the all-party group on hydrogen. And as Alex said, I sit on the Bay Select Committee. Now let's be honest, we all want a greener, cleaner future. We all want to get there somehow. And I think there should be a consensus that there's not going to be one solution to all our problems, how to get to net zero. I think before we have any conversation, whether it's about hydrogen, about carbon capture and storage, but about electric vehicles, we've got to accept there's no disconnect between supporting electric vehicles, supporting hydrogen, supporting reforesting, as myriad solutions. Because if you just back one technology for the future, we're going to fail, as simple as that. And in my view, we are not going to get there with electricity alone, or electric vehicles, whether it's home heating alone. Hydrogen is an incredibly important part of the solution. And I'll get onto that shortly. But I also want to say hydrogen is an incredibly important part of the economic solution for this country. The government wants to talk about building back better. as it should. But we're not going to build back better unless we create jobs and new jobs in new industries. Yes, we can have more jobs if we tinker around what we currently got, but we fundamentally need a wholesale new industry in this country to create those good jobs. And I believe hydrogen is one of those key aspects of it. Now, why is that? Because we all hear a lot about electric vehicles, for instance, but you cannot run an HGV, a proper HGV, just on a battery electric motor. You just can't. You cannot fly a plane with a battery in it. You cannot drive a ship with a battery electric. Frankly, you can't even heat a lot of homes via the electrical ways and heat pumps. I very much believe that hydrogen is one of those solutions that will reach out and help getting us to net zero, and that's why we should back it. And let's be honest, when we're talking about electric vehicles, and I'm going to have a dig at electric vehicles, they're great for lowering carbon. However, they're very little economic benefit for this country. 73% of all lithium-ion batteries, which go in cars, are produced in the People's Republic of China, a country that has an awful human rights record, awful environmental record, and frankly is not our friend. We cannot make much money out of it. Whereas for hydrogen, I very much believe hydrogen engines are the economic future. Because I'm sure many of you know that a third of all hydrogen engines out there at the moment have got parts made in the UK. So we're already big players in the hydrogen market. On top of that, we have a natural advantage of our normal gas network, our natural gas network, which I believe can be and should be repurposed to put hydrogen, at least partly, into the pipes, because it'll be easier to decarbonise our homes. Now, to give you some sort of scales, I mean, we need to get home heating counts for 23% of our national emissions at the moment, and that's way too high. So one of the easiest and quickest ways of decarbonising our country is to actually do something about home heating. Now, let's get me wrong, some places will prefer heat pumps, but I believe the easiest and the most efficient way is going into the hydrogen boilers. If nothing else, hydrogen boilers fundamentally are cheaper than heat pumps. I think an average hydrogen boiler is about £2,500, and that's not cheap. Let's be honest, not cheap. But compared to a heat pump, which is anywhere between £6,000 to £18,000, that is not financially viable for the overwhelming majority of the country. We already have the pipe network, which, yes, we'll have to do some updation, but we have to update our pipes anyway. We massively updated our network when we put central heating in. We have to constantly redo our water pipes. So there's no real difference, in my view, of changing the pipes when they need to do it by putting a percentage of hydrogen in it. On top of that, we need to really make sure that we create this new jobs and this new value. In seats like mine, Rother Valley, which was, I'm sure you know, half the miners' strike with 6 former pits, there aren't many local jobs anymore. People have to go further afield, to Workstop, to Sheffield, or even further away. I very much see the UK having a sort of a hydrogen hub where we can both make hydrogen but also create the skills which we can then export abroad. And that to me is why hydrogen is so exciting, because we can back it and we can create jobs and wealth and lower our carbon emissions. Because we know they are going to have, hydrogen is going to be an integral part of the solution for the vehicles and the heating I mentioned. If we get there first and fastest, we can make a lot of money for our country and create jobs and wealth. And if nothing else, we are all conservatives around this room. We want to use the environment to make wealth, as well as to lower our emissions, which is incredibly important. So I very much see there is a golden opportunity. No other country in the world has really embraced hydrogen fully yet. Others have, like Germany's put 9 billion euros towards hydrogen. Portugal's put 7 billion. So our country is desperately out there looking for the solution when it comes to hydrogen. But we need to get there first and quickest, I believe, to make the financial impact. Now, Alex mentioned the type of hydrogen as well, and the type of hydrogen is incredibly important. We are not there yet with what I say the ultimate hydrogen, which is green hydrogen. But we need to get there. And if we put the government investment and the business investment as well to actually get to proper blue hydrogen and then the carbon capture and storage, which is going to be essential, then we can move to the green hydrogen. My one concern, I've reached out to the business around here, is we don't just go to blue hydrogen and we sit on that. We need to make that more difficult jump from blue hydrogen to green hydrogen. And my concern, even talking to various fossil fuel companies who are very much in favour of hydrogen, is that we don't stop at blue. We need to get to green. And we need commitments from the industry to say, we need hydrogen, but we need the right sort of hydrogen. And in the interim, we can get to blue hydrogen with carbon capture and storage, but ultimately, we do need that green hydrogen. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex. I'll now invite Dr. Michaela Kendall to speak.
Oh, right. Thank you. Hi, my name is Michaela Kendall. I'm CEO of Adelan, and we're the longest running fuel cell company in the UK. We're based in Birmingham. The company's been operating for 25 years, and I've personally been working in fuel cells and hydrogen for 30 years. So it's really interesting to hear from Alex there about the role of hydrogen from the UK's perspective. I've actually had a career which is more international and looking at it from an international perspective and looking at the developments in fuel cells and hydrogen over the years. And actually, for climate change and for net zero, we need all the tools in the box, I believe. Fuel cells and hydrogen are one of them. Part of the hydrogen economy is the technology as well as the fuel. So we have to sort of separate out a little bit the fuel, which is hydrogen, and under the hydrogen economy umbrella is the technologies as well. So you're talking about things like electrolyzers that generate the hydrogen and fuel cells that use the hydrogen, and sometimes combustion devices as well that can use the hydrogen. So you've got all sorts of technology there, devices, products that can be made, and it's predicted to be an economy worth $11 trillion by 2050, according to Bloomberg. So there's enormous economic opportunity there. And what's unique about the UK, and especially certain regions within the UK, including the Northwest where we are, is the industrial heritage and the skill sets and the industrial landscape. It's not a coincidence that we are one of the longest running fuel cell companies in the world. The UK has a significant innovation landscape, which it produces lots of ideas and innovations, but we haven't culturally tended to commercialise all of those. And I think there's a real opportunity now with hydrogen and with those technologies associated with hydrogen to commercialise those and to build businesses that make money for this country, but also export environmental justice around the world, because 2 billion people remain not connected to the electricity grid and have unreliable electricity. There's even more people. So we can provide that improvement in air quality, reduction of carbon, and generate power for people that require it. And for me, that's a very that's a driving force behind my interest in fuel cells and hydrogen. And the UK has a unique position then, and an opportunity as well as a responsibility to deliver those technologies. So we have a unique opportunity and a unique place to do that, to decarbonise especially, but also to get other advantages. So hydrogen enables renewables. I think that's one of the great things about hydrogen. With the dropping price in renewable energy, we can generate hydrogen using that renewable power, so green hydrogen. But to build up that capacity will take a long time. So for me, the blue and the green hydrogen argument is not necessarily the primary one. I think we just need to generate as much and build that capacity as soon as possible, and to deliver these the fuel to the market and the technologies into the marketplace. Fuel cells also enable renewables. So if you have an intermittent renewable source of power, then you may need a fuel cell to back up and to create stability with that power delivery. And fuel cells actually enable batteries as well. So on a fuel cell, there's a fuel cell car. There's a fuel cell car out there demonstrated by Ineos, and I have a fuel cell car myself, a hydrogen fuel cell car. You're actually enabling, the fuel cell's enabling the battery, because you can make a smaller battery to go onto the vehicle, and you still have a generator which is clean. It doesn't produce any air pollution in cities. It just produces water from the exhaust. And so those fuel cells are really enabling batteries. Batteries won't solve everything, and therefore fuel cells will be a complement to those batteries that we develop. And most OEMs in the car industry understand that and will move to that point. Electrifying the vehicle platforms is an important step forwards, but hydrogen is there, and hydrogen is potentially one of the few solutions that will work for some applications such as HGVs and with buses. So I think there's many reasons for hydrogen, and there's a great opportunity for the UK, the scientific and industrial base, to deliver that. We will need good policy to enable that. hydrogen fuel cells has not been developed anywhere in the world without good supportive policy, and we can point to several countries where that's happened. So I think that's an important thing that we can discuss here at the Conservative Party conference. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Michaela. Speaking there on the international piece, fuel cells, and I also noted you mentioned you have a hydrogen car, so I might pick up on that as well in a bit. Amer.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to completely agree with Alex and what Michaela have just said. So I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Amer. I'm the director of the Manchester Fuel Cell Innovation Centre at Manchester Metropolitan University. And I think the biggest problem with hydrogen is the confusion element. You know, if we look at what we do within our university, we work on fuel cells, we look on membranes, we work on materials, and we work on electrolyzers. The amount of times I have meetings with people where they still refer to the Hindenburg, that's one. The education problem is another one. And you look at what children are taught in schools, they're taught within physics or chemistry about fuel cells or about hydrogen, and that's it. So alongside developing the Fuel Cell Centre, what we did was we developed Europe's first targeted programme for hydrogen education, because I think that's critical. You know, we teach children from between the age of 13 through to 18. That we didn't do that by ourselves. We did that in partnership with European countries. We did it in partnership with industry. We did it in partnership with government, in city regions. And I think from what we've seen since we opened, I mean, I opened a hydrogen lab on the 5th floor of a tower block. How long do you think that took? That's the problem, because there needs to be certain reforms in the standards, the HSE, the DESIR. There's multiple different areas that this economy is really trying to resolve itself. So we support businesses. That's predominantly what we do. Our researchers do research on fuel cells, they do research on electrolyzers, but our core focus is supporting businesses. We've supported over 80 businesses who are now actively involved in the hydrogen fuel cell supply chain. It's not all about industrial businesses, because we support them as well. It's about creating that supply chain of not only businesses that can recognise what's hydrogen going to bring to me as a business. I think only now that the hydrogen strategy has come out, and I think it's fantastic, you know, it really creates that pathway between now, 2030 and up to 2050. You know, we've all got ambitious targets with whichever city or region you've come from. We're 2038 in Greater Manchester. You know, I'm Mancunian and I love this city, and I think that's amazing, but that's difficult. And how do we get there? We're not going to get there with one technology. We recognise that multiple technologies will get us there, and probably the technologies that haven't even been invented yet. That's probably a critical area to look at. So the argument for blue and green hydrogen is a great one, but I think we wrote a strategy to underpin the national strategy for Greater Manchester, and effectively all it says is we look at our transport infrastructure. I know what Amer wants. We're going through a bus reform. We're looking at all the multiple opportunities that hydrogen brings to this region, and it is in that heavy transport area. You know, I would love a hydrogen car, but it'd be sat there because I can't refuel it. And my wife would probably kill me as well because it costs a lot of money. But that, you know, the reality of it is, this is all now. We're at that point now where we need to scale, but we can accelerate this market very, very quickly. Now, that hydrogen strategy we wrote, we didn't think green hydrogen was going to be an opportunity within this region until 2031. We've now entered a collaboration, including Cadent and other partners, where we're looking at a green hydrogen facility over in Stafford Park, and that has the potential to be UK's largest green hydrogen facility. That all of a sudden brings opportunity for us as a university as well, because the businesses we support them at early technology readiness levels. We're on the 5th floor of tower block, I've mentioned. But what's next for us? It's about industrialising those businesses, creating that market, carving up that area to say, what are we good at here? We're in Manchester, we talk about materials aspect of reducing cost for fuel cells and reducing cost for electrolyzers. We're going to talk about graphene. We need to replace those materials in fuel cells, we need to replace the materials in electrolyzers, but ultimately we need to try and turn this into an economy. And I think the biggest and most critical part of this whole thing is the skills agenda. And I think that's where we need to bring everyone with us. This isn't about IP, this isn't about, yes, IP is important when it comes to your individual product, but effectively we're all working to that net zero agenda. That's not owned by anyone. In fact, that's a requirement that we all need to achieve. So I think engaging with the industrial sector, with the academic sector, with government on that skills agenda is key, and we're already leading that skills pathway for our industrial cluster. But I think our industrial cluster ultimately needs to be linked up with all of the other industrial clusters in the UK, and ultimately the transport needs to be linked up, because I've had an electric vehicle in the past and I needed 4 or 5 cards when I went to see my sister in Scotland. I got caught speeding as well, but that's a different matter. But I think you can use 4 or 5 cards, and it just creates confusion. So I think the biggest part for me in this whole thing is demystifying the technology, demystifying the confusion, and let's get our people skilled up to the right requirements. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Amar, covering there a few points on the demystifying and education skills agenda there as well, and also scale is another key point. Richard.
Thank you. So one of the perils of going last is you're rapidly scribbling out all of the things that everybody else has already said. So forgive me if I... Is that on? Can you hear me? You can hear me, okay. Thank you. Sorry. So my name is Richard Walsh, and I'm Head of External Affairs at Cadent. And for those that don't know who Cadent are, we're the local gas network here. We are 4 out of the 8 UK gas networks, and we operate a geographical footprint from the northwest of England, West Midlands, east of England, and all the way down to North London, and we serve about 11 million of gas consumers. We're effectively half of any metric in terms of pipeline consumers or footprint for the gas industry, the gas distribution industry here. And like we've already heard, Cadent as a gas distribution company is also grappling with how we get to net zero. What's the role that we can play as a distribution company? What's the role that we can play in the levelling up agenda and helping to create a vibrant hydrogen economy? And we see a huge amount of opportunities, and I'll probably echo some of the things we've already said here. Demystifying is a really interesting word. I spent 20 years in the energy sector, largely in an environmental and consenting role. I know that because I was writing my notes with my 20th anniversary pen, which is a bit sad. But for the vast majority of that, working in the electricity sector, I wasn't really aware of the role that gas had. I wasn't really, certainly not aware of the role of hydrogen. And preparing briefings for a rather large electricity company for ministerial meetings, it was all about keeping the lights on. It wasn't about keeping people safe and keeping people warm. And in essence, we're probably a bit of a victim of our own success there. But just some metrics. So in the UK, about 300 terawatt hours of electricity are used every year. By contrast, 900 terawatts of gas are used every year. So in the grand scheme of the energy that we use, that we need, gas far outweighs electricity. And yet, as I said, I'm always surprised at how very little attention it gets, although if I'd probably thought about that, that's probably a bit more true a couple of weeks ago than it is over the last couple of days. At Cadent, we're leading on a number of projects that demonstrate the viability, the safety, the practicability of hydrogen in our economy and in our sector. These include a 20% hydrogen blending project at Keele University, our industrial hydrogen cluster that Amer mentioned in the northwest here, in Ellesmere Port, HyNet, and we've just, alongside Bays and with another company called Northern Gas Networks, we've just opened the world's first hydrogen home. So demonstrating hydrogen in the home, 100% in boilers or on sort of cookers, and again that's open to the public, absolutely worth a visit. So I've said that the whole country is dependent on gas. We need to ensure that gas industry transitions to net zero. It's absolutely imperative we help meet the government's target. Now, the Committee on Climate Change have acknowledged that you need a gas. You need a renewable gas of some kind to get to net zero, because gas does things that electricity just can't. Gas can help with seasonal peaks, can provide storage, and it helps to provide resilience in the energy system. But I'm not here wholly to talk about gas, and I think it's really refreshing that we've all probably echoed what I'd like to call a whole systems approach. It has to be the right use of energy with the consumer at heart and at mind. And actually some of the things that we see in terms of what we like to call the sort of format wars, where things like hydrogen are pitted against heat pumps, it's not helpful, nor is the blue-green hydrogen debate, I think, particularly helpful. You are going to need a range of solutions to meet net zero, and to be able to practically deliver the benefits for consumers, and at the same time, as Alex said, seizing the opportunity that we think hydrogen particularly provides to grow a really vibrant energy sector in this country. Now, we absolutely welcome the government's hydrogen strategy, and I think that the personal ambitions that we've seen through successive energy ministers and indeed the Prime Minister are incredibly welcome. Other countries are catching up on us though. So I think if we would have sat here last year, pandemic wasn't on, I think we would have probably congratulated ourselves that we were in the vanguard. I think I hope we are still in that vanguard and that ambition is there, but I'm seeing increasingly other countries starting to steal a bit of a march on what, again, I think could be a uniquely British opportunity to grow a hydrogen economy and export that across the world. Now, I will stop fairly shortly, but I think the debate on hydrogen is often quite technical. I mean, I said that you win the bingo for the first mention of Hindenburg as well, actually. So it's technical, technocratic, and it's not particularly consumer focused. And I think that's something that we definitely want to change. One of the things that we've done recently, it's just out this week. I have got a few copies, but I'm happy to give the link to Bright Blue, is our own 10-point plan. So that's Cadent saying, actually, it's not just about what government can do, it's about what companies like ours can do. Let's just crack on with this. We've got a great opportunity here. And just picking up two of the things that Amer said, actually, 2 of our 10 points are about skills and training. So an educational piece and developing a hydrogen skills academy to train the workforce of the future. So I will draw it to a close there and hand back to the chair, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard, there covering whole systems approach, sort of skills and training agenda, but also asking this question about what UK needs to do to stay ahead and seize that very British opportunity. I'd like to go straight to the floor for questions. Before I do so, and I've noted 2 at the front there, I would also just like to mention that Slido is not working online. So to our online audience, if you would like to post your questions on Twitter, we will try and take them through that instead. So going to the first question at the front here. I'm not sure your microphone's working.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yep.
It is, yeah.
Hold it close and that should do the trick.
Kandu Patel, former Cadent employee, so I know something of what you do. The query I have is about how the energy industry sees things. I mean, for example, I see BP and Shell shares have more or less been pretty flat over the recent periods, and their prospects are not even that great if they carry on with fossil fuels as they have been doing. So what are they actually contributing to the sort of things that you're doing in terms of investment and research and development?
Okay, thank you very much. And if I'll take the gentleman on the left there as well at the same time.
Hi, my name's David Bourne, retired environmental engineer. So my question is this. If the Conservative government were able to take advantage of the Labour's magic money tree and use that money immediately, would the industry that you're talking about be able to switch things on almost immediately and go into production for immediate use by the rest of the country? Or would there have to be further research and, I don't know, some sort of strategic development before that could happen?
Yeah. Okay, Alex, did you want to go first? And then I'll come to Michaela.
I'll come to the others about how quickly they can turn it on. My understanding is, in a short answer, yes, pretty quickly. We're seeing electrolyzers like ITM Power right next to my, in Sheffield, next to my seat. One of the world's largest hydrogen electrolyzers. We can do more. Can we get, let's say, to the green hydrogen? No, there's still the research needed, and to get to proper blue hydrogen, we need more CCUS storage. But we need that money, frankly, to go into the research side. But we have most of the ideas. We just get there. On the gentleman's comment about fossil fuel companies, having worked for Shell, no longer work for them, just to clarify, I'm not going to shill for Shell. However, what I experienced going for them is there was a drive to go low carbon, and they realised, in my impression, they realised that the fossil fuel industry is going to be over, and they were pivoting into renewables. Hydrogen was one of the things, battery technology, so they were focusing on it. You could say because they want to make more money, you could say because they have the green credentials at their heart. That's not for me to judge, but they're definitely focusing. I think one of the stats they always told me, for Shell, they would use about 10% of their R&D was on renewables. Now 10% may not sound a lot to most people, but 10% of Shell's R&D is bigger than any other renewable company in the world, because it's such a big company. So there was a general feeling from Shell and BP that we had to go to low carbon because the right thing to do, and also to survive as a business, you'd have to do it. Because as I said, the whole world is going low carbon, whether we like it or not. The whole world, I like it, but the whole world is going low carbon. So everyone needs to pivot to that. Everyone has duty to pivot to that. There is an argument to say that they should be investing more money in those technologies and get there. But that's as I said, I'm not representative of Shell anymore. So, absolutely.
Great. Michaela, did you want to comment on that last one, or
Yeah,
we can...
probably, yeah. Just in terms of scaling up, I mean, all the technologies that we're talking about really today are over 100 years old, actually, and so it's not the lack of technology. It's actually the lack of those things getting to market and getting into products. So, but there are a number of products now. There's some of the largest fuel cell and hydrogen businesses in the world doing very, very well, and they are growing. They're not. There's quite a few in the UK, but they're quite small, partly because of the regulatory framework. Because in China, in Japan, in the US, there have been very strong pushes and pulling those technologies into the marketplace to reduce the market barriers. There are a number of market barriers in place at the moment. We all know what they are. They're very addressable. They have to be addressed, and I think that's one of the reasons I'm here today is to try to talk to people and to understand how we can do that and how we can do it quickly, because we need to do it quickly. There is a pressure, and we need to increase the pace. So I think the important thing about industry is to understand that very few self-disrupt. So it's very unlikely that somebody's going to go, okay, I'll completely change my business. It will take disruptive businesses, and they are coming through. So I expect that scale up to come through soon.
Cool. Okay, thank you very much. Next questions. To in the front. Actually, no, we'll go for all three. Go for it.
Thank you very much. Jane Pratt, I'm Cabinet Member for Infrastructure, which includes climate change on Monmouthshire County Council. And I'm not a scientist, so it's interesting to hear your comments. But the dilemma that we have is we've got a council that's about 700 square miles. It's a very large area. We've tried electric vehicles, and we can't get one that will cope with that. So we really see the future being hydrogen, and I really don't think it's that far off. We need to build a new depot, we need to harness the water, and we've got plenty of water in Wales. And, I can see a future where we will have these hydrogen vehicles. We have got a hydrogen tie-up with River Simple, and we have got a hydrogen facility, refilling facility in Abergavenny, actually. So we are hoping to trial hydrogen cars with our community as soon as we can. So the problem is getting the vehicles. We're desperate to be more sustainable. We've got a climate emergency pledge, but we just can't find the vehicles that will help us to achieve this. And let's be honest about it, a waste vehicle is probably one of the most polluting vehicles that we have on the road. So that's the first problem. The second thing I'd like to ask you about is the retrofitting of homes. We have a very slow-moving Welsh Labour government. They talk a lot, but very little action. And we really need to see, I totally agree with Alexandra, we've got a very similar setup in South Wales to you. And we need to see people being trained to actually, retrofit the homes. We need the engineers. And we have people in really severe fuel poverty. So we need to see this quickly, and it's not happening quickly enough. So how are we going to accelerate it?
Accelerate. Okay, so retrofitting of homes and getting vehicles on the EV front. If I may, I'll come back to you both. Alex, did you want to kick off?
Just briefly. I think the infrastructure point, listening on to the gentleman next to you, is the biggest problem. The most northerly hydrogen refilling station is in Rotherham, in South Yorkshire. There's still 3 hours drive to get to the border. That is the most northerly hydrogen. It's not there. And we're not going to have the refilling stations. You're not going to have people buying the cars, which means the companies are not going to be selling the cars, which means you're in the problem you can't buy the vehicles. So that's why government, in my view, needs to be a bit more forceful and demand companies like Shell, BP, Texaco, put in hydrogen refilling stations and expand the network so that people can have it. You have to build the infrastructure first, otherwise no one will buy the cars, and that's a big problem. And it's not just in Wales, talking about the international side, places like we're not going to electrify electric vehicles in Russia. We're just not. We're not going to have electric vehicles for large chunks of South America or Africa. The only, therefore, I believe, the only low carbon solution is if we go into hydrogen. But you need to have the infrastructure in it. On retrofitting homes, I completely agree. We're in a current situation where we're building lots of new homes. The government have great progress, but there's bad regulations. For instance, why are there not regulations saying every new home has to have an electric charging point?
Sure.
Why is there not regulations saying every new home has to have photovoltaic panels on the roof? Why is there regulations saying there's not going to be space for a battery? But in 10 years' time, every home will have to be retrofitted to put a battery inside a home. We all know this. We need to get the regulations now, so all the new homes, we don't have to retrofit.
Michaela, did you want to comment on that as well?
Yeah, just one thing. So it's chicken and egg. That's what hydrogen always goes through. So it's supply and demand. And in an early market, you have to balance supply and demand. It's quite difficult because it's a bit staggered, you know. So, but there are people that are producing hydrogen vehicles. We're involved with a project which is government funded. It's H2GV MIDS, which is a Midlands HGV project developing HGV trucks that are operating on hydrogen. There are actually other waste trucks, as you mentioned, that run on hydrogen. So we know people and we can help with those kind of supply and demand synchronization. There are people out there that are doing all of this stuff that you think should be happening. So I'd like to give you some courage. And you know people like River Simple. There are other people that make hydrogen vehicles in the UK. The issue is coordination. We've just got a national hydrogen strategy, brilliant, that just lays out the foundation, but there now needs to be a clear strategy on how we maximise the benefit to the UK.
If I can comment on the retrofitting one as well, actually. And it's worth saying that, you know, as a series of gas companies, one of the things that we're doing, working in conjunction with BEIS, is actually looking at all of those challenges within the domestic sphere. There's a project going on in Fife by SGN, which is looking at 100% conversion of about 300 homes there. It's going to use an electrolyser to create the hydrogen there, and again, sort of ironing out the problems. One of the key projects that Cadent's been delivering is actually on hydrogen blending. So not necessarily going fastest to 100%, but 20% into the domestic network. And we've been doing that successfully at Keele University, and we've just closed that project down and moved on to an area in the northeast called Windlayton. And that was about sort of 250 homes. Now, blending 20% hydrogen into the network, and there's a reason why 20% is a bit of an interesting figure. No changes to properties, no changes to burners, no changes to boilers. Now, if you were to roll that across all of the country at a 20% blend, that saves the carbon equivalent of 2 million cars, for what is effectively a very low interventionist approach. And again, would be a really good stimulation, we believe, to the sort of broader hydrogen economy. So I think just picking up on the Monmouthshire thing, there are other ways of also sort of looking at retrofitting and just moving faster with things like blending. And I know your local distribution company, Wells and West, would be delighted to have a conversation with you.
Amer, did you want to comment as well?
Yeah, I'm going to come at it from a completely different angle. I mean, I totally agree with what everyone's saying again, but for me, it's about the investment decision. So if currently people making investment decisions on vehicles they need to procure for local authorities, they're happening now for vehicles they need to buy in a few years' time, I'm assuming. Because we are looking at a similar sort of scenario in Manchester, where we're supporting our region. And can I put my hand on heart and say, do people making investment decisions know absolutely everything about net zero? They don't. You know, I know now about net zero. That's my job, and I've talked about hydrogen for almost 10 years in Greater Manchester, and for many years no one listened. But we've ended up with a fantastic research facility. But I think now what the hydrogen strategy is really doing, it's doing what it's done in most other countries. It's unlocking that market, and it's unlocking the market for research and development for businesses. It's unlocking it for infrastructure. So the vehicles will come, and I think it's about making sure that the people who are making decisions, they don't just go with what they know, because they know electric. It's available, we'll buy it. It might be wrong, because I totally agree. Why would you buy a HGV where the battery alone is 15 tonnes, or wherever it might be? You know, it'll get 100 miles range. I might be stereotyping there, but that's the point. You know, it's about you've got to look at this as a whole life cost as well. So if we're all of a sudden we're bringing in clean air zones, what does that add to the cost? What does that add to the actual bottom line of your project? Because it will always come down to the cost of the vehicle is much more than the battery one. How do you bring that cost down? Well, again, as Michaela said, it's chicken and egg.
Great, thank you for those answers. We had two questions at the front here, so if we can bring the mic to them, that would be great.
Thank you so much. So my name's Matt Barney. I'm a councillor on Nottinghamshire, a county councillor on Nottinghamshire County Council. But in my day job, I'm very privileged to work for a green hydrogen zero-emission fuels company called GeoPura, which you may or may not have heard of. We're a small startup, but we work with our big brother Siemens Energy in collaboration. We've had a really, really exciting 3 years. We haven't stopped. We cannot believe the demand. And I just wanted to make a couple of comments in response to the supply chain. We're finding that, as Michaela said, the technology, this isn't new stuff. It's been around 100 years. It's completely safe. Let's stop talking about hydrogen bombs. It works. It does the job. It's there. But we need to scale up rapidly. And to be frank, and while I've got the opportunity to sit in front of distinguished colleagues like your dear self, government seems to be somewhat behind the curve, I would say, of where the industry is at and where technology is at. And I think there are some marked things that government can do and ought to be doing, and Conservative government ought to be doing, with the opportunities of Brexit. We should be cutting the red tape to access funds from BEIS. We're still having to go through all the European Journal chapter stuff to get our hands on government finance. It's slow. We've got 100 people across the country waiting to install electrolyzers, but we can't get the electrolyzers to them because we can't get the security of supply because the confidence isn't there. And so BEIS could help with that. You could help tomorrow. The other thing that I think government could do is just as you've done with petrol and diesel engines in vehicles, putting in that ban. There's bans you could do, other bans with gas supply, we're working with diesel generator replacements.
I may need to press you for your question, but if you could wrap up.
My question is, could the government look to ban in other areas, as you've done with diesel and petrol vehicles, for things like stationary displacements for diesel generators? The technology's there, the customers are waiting, let's get on with it.
Great, thank you very much. And our next speaker as well. Question, sorry.
Good afternoon. I think it's probably more going to be for Alexandra and Richard, really. You mentioned 20% that you've been doing with Keel. How far could we go with hydrogen to be burning it in normal houses now without actually having to change maybe the boilers? I'm assuming you could only do so much burning of hydrogen on a normal boiler before you'd have to change the technology.
Yeah, so it's actually, it is that 20%. So I mean, historically, when we had town's gas, before we had natural gas, we had a proportion of hydrogen in the gas system there at about 40 to 50%, depending on which engineer you're talking to who were part of that transition. So the test that we worked on with HSE and with BEIS at Keele University was to look at that magic number, and it's around about 20 to 23% before you need to change your burner, your boilers. So at 20%, so this is why I say a 20% blend, let's just bring it back slightly into the network, you don't see any changes. The best thing about doing the Keel project, perversely, for somebody who works in sort of public relations, was how dull it actually was, because people didn't know it was happening. They weren't really aware of the changes because they didn't have to do any behavioural changes there. Burner worked like a normal burner, boiler worked like a normal boiler. To go further, to go to 100%, then yes, you do have to have a different boiler, a different burner. The house that we've opened alongside Northern Gas in Winlayton, called Everything with Hydrogen's Got High, High Grove, we called it, in the hope that Prince Charles will come there. Working on it. So we've got new boilers made by Baxi. We've got new cookers, so that's working on 100%. But you wouldn't need an intervention there. But Baxi, Bosch, great British brands, made half of them made down the road in places like Preston. They're working on hydrogen ready boilers, and they're working on 100% hydrogen boilers. So that technology is there. Again, as we keep saying, hydrogen isn't a new fuel. It's there. We have the opportunity to really embrace this.
And I'm glad you mentioned town's gas, but when we talk about hydrogen, we should talk about that. Hydrogen's already been in the pipes for many years. I don't know where you live, but I live in a sort of Victorian Edwardian house in London. That many years ago clearly had hydrogen through its pipes, but it doesn't have it now. So it's ridiculous. We're all going backwards now. On your comment about how quickly can we, yes, I agree, we should be more interventionist. I'm a member of the committee, but I'm not actually a member of the government, so I do lobby the government. One other thing they could do is the renewable transport fuel obligation, how to actually get sort of hydrogen into vehicles. It is dragging their feet. And I think this is one of the concerns, one of the reasons why I'm putting pressure on the government, is to say we have an opportunity to do this quickly, because we talked about HGVs. It's going to happen. We want to get there first and quick, reduce our emissions, and we can make money out of it and jobs and revitalise left behind areas like mine, levelling up. We can have this great opportunity. We can't be too scared. And I think if, COVID has showed us many things, but one of the reasons why I think the UK has bounced back from COVID so well was because of the vaccine. Because frankly, the government intervened and said, we know a vaccine is going to work. We haven't got maybe we don't know exactly what, so we're going to back several different vaccines heavily, because we know one of them at least will come out trumps. And it did. And I think we need to do that when we look at all aspects of net zero. The government needs to heavily back a range of different solutions, because we know that some of them will come good, some of them will fail, and accept, like every business, you're going to have some failures. We can't just sit back and wait till the perfect technology comes along, where China and Russia and Japan and America and Germany are making the money out of it, and we're just buying it off them. It defeats the point of all this.
Thank you. Michaela, did you want to make a comment there?
Yeah, so a little bit about regulation. So I absolutely agree with you that regulation at the moment is not supporting these technologies to be rolled out in the UK. That has to change. It has to change for net zero anyway, but the faster we do it and the better we do it, the more it will stimulate the innovation chain. At the moment, as I said at the beginning, there is a failure in the innovation chain. We're not commercialising those technologies. That's not because we haven't got them, it's because we're not taking them any further. That's a failure of regulation currently. I'll give you one example. When I go to a construction site and I put my fuel cell out there, I can beat a diesel engine in terms of costs, 65% cheaper to operate it. It eliminates 98% of carbon running on a bio LPG. I use LPG as well as hydrogen in my fuel cells. And still, the diesel engine was actually subsidised. The diesel fuel has a UK government subsidy to it. That will be removed in April 22, but that's not a level playing field for these technologies, and that has to be corrected urgently. Yeah, thank you.
Lovely. I think there are another three questions that I've spotted. So, gentleman at the front here, to start us off.
Hi, my name's Mike Adams. I'm the Environment Ambassador for Nottinghamshire County Council. One of the things I want to query about you, which sort of takes it away from the environment standpoint to some degree, is the cost. Now, I understand to refill a hydrogen car at the moment, it's around about £50, as I understand it.
£42 I
Thank
paid
you.
last week. Yeah. Thank you.
Not a bad shout there, then, but yeah. But obviously that is quite a high cost in terms of what the electricity return at the moment is for if you were to power up an electric car. So how are we going to ensure that hydrogen is basically available for everybody to access of all incomes? Because the cars are expensive at the moment. The fuel's then expensive as well. Whereas with electrics, you are getting those benefits, even though the car's expensive, the running costs are incredibly low. So how are we going to ensure that's accessible for everybody?
I'll hold that thought for a moment, and we'll go for another couple of questions. Gentleman on that same row. Yep.
Hi, Rob Leclerc, member from Western-super-Mare. Similar follow-on, really. I guess it's more about kind of the physics of why you would do this. So the gas is a store of energy. It isn't a source of energy, and it takes energy to put in. Electric cars, for example, are circa 80% efficient of the energy that goes in, whereas I understand that the production of the hydrogen is still sort of 25-30%. So is this a macro solution for us from an efficiency of energy perspective, outside some of the agreeable edge cases where you need high energy density, such as road haulage? But actually, how much of a wide-scale solution for us is this?
Thank you. And we'll take one more, which is the gentleman in that end row. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much. It was said right towards the start of the presentation that, I can't remember the figure, but a very high proportion of hydrogen is produced using fossil fuels at the moment. I understand that the best kind of hydrogen will be made by renewable electricity. At the moment, we are still building nuclear power stations within the UK. So my question is, does the nuclear industry have a part to play in producing hydrogen for the future? Because those stations are going to be in service operating for many, many years.
Okay, thank you very much. Three questions there. Michaela, do you want to kick off with the cost one?
Yeah, definitely. Economies of scale. Simple. No difficulty. We know when you produce products in hundreds, maybe thousands. They're ridiculously expensive. When you get to tens, hundreds of thousands, they're 90% cheaper. In my case, that I know that from my supply chain. And if you look at Ballard, which is the largest fuel cell company in the world, that's what they've experienced. So there's nothing really expensive about this technology. It's just about volume. So I don't have any concerns at all in the long term about getting the cost down. And it's really important actually to get the cost down, because until you get the cost down, you can't roll them out at scale and you can't achieve the carbon targets that you want to hit. So it's absolutely critical, but I don't see any issue at all. Just on the efficiencies issue, it's not so much, I mean, there's this sort of theoretical kind of side of things, and you can sort of try and make it perfect. But the reality is that nothing's perfect. And actually, when you go to efficiencies, you don't really consider things like, well, recharging the vehicle, for example. I had an electric car in 2008. I really enjoyed having electric cars. I love electric cars, but it just didn't work for me personally. And just refilling in 5 minutes is something that I can do. It just fits in with my life. So for me, it's not so much about those intricate efficiency calculations. It's more about a sort of practical, how do we use those products? And so it's more of it's just a practical, how does this product operate in the marketplace? And you only understand that when you put them in the marketplace. The problem at the moment is they're not enough in the marketplace. The parallel I always use is with mobile phones. We had no idea we were going to live off mobile phones when we first got them. Now we just run our diaries and everything off them. So watch our films. So I think actually fuel cells and hydrogen produces these opportunities we don't even understand yet. And in time, when they're out there in consumers' hands, we will understand that better. So I think it's revolutionary, actually, as a technology. And that's part of the reason why I would push for it. And in terms of the electricity, hydrogen doesn't matter where the electricity comes from. So it's a bigger question strategically for the country.
Yeah, I was just going to make a very quick point on economy of scale. I absolutely agree with you. And one of the things in the sort of domestic setting that we're looking at, obviously with hydrogen boilers, and Alex mentioned at the start, sort of a couple of hundred or a couple of grand, in total a couple of hundred more than a normal boiler, around about 1,600 quid. Both Baxi and Bosch, combined, wrote to the Prime Minister, I think in July, and said that when these things are, when we start manufacturing these at scale, we're absolutely guaranteeing that they're going to be on parity with your normal boiler. So again, just making the point about economy of scale.
The mixture of gas, just to dive in for a second, but you know how you said you mix it into people's houses now?
Yes.
How does that increase the cost to consumers because of the current cost of hydrogen?
Yeah, so I mean, because they are scalable demonstrator projects, those costs aren't really borne in the same way that a normal, if we were doing this normally across the country now. So obviously, and again, one of the points about cost, and I think it gets lost sometimes in the net zero debate, because we pit one format against another. Net zero is going to cost. The cost of decarbonisation will be borne by consumers, and undoubtedly it's going to be different from the mix that we see today and the costs that we see today in electricity and gas. But again, alongside efficiencies, bring in other things in terms of lack of disruption, lack of intervention in the home if we were to do a 20% blend, the savings there, the savings of disruption. And again, repurposing a gas network that is a strategic national asset that you've all paid for. It's the greatest form of recycling, really. So you bring all those costs that have to sort of come into play, as well as the sort of just bare economic bill, I think, as well.
I'm going to actually slightly disagree with the panel. You talked about costs about hydrogen vehicles. I don't think they will be cost effective. I don't think we'll see fleets of hydrogen powered passenger vehicles. I think that battle has already been lost. The government is committed to electrification. The market is committed to electrification. As we talk about how people understand electric vehicles. You plug in your phone when you go to bed. You plug in your car when you go to bed. Even though you could say you fill it with a pump at a petrol station, I agree it's simple, but I think that battle's long gone. I think we shouldn't actually be focusing too much now on passenger vehicles. We should be focusing on the HGVs, the future technologies, the trains, the planes, the home heating. That is where it is, and actually accept that for whatever reason that we haven't got there. But it's a similar situation like Betamax versus VHS, or Blu-ray versus the DVD, HD, DVD, whatever. Ultimately, one could argue that the better technology lost. But the market demanded VHS rather than Betamax. The market demanded Blu-ray instead. So just because technology is better doesn't mean it always win out. There's a lot of other aspects around it. And this cost of electric vehicles are going to go rapidly down, especially once we understand how to use second-hand electric vehicles. That is the biggest inhibitor at the moment. I mean, I've never bought a brand new car. It's a waste of money, in my view. I've always bought second-hand cars because they're so much cheaper. But at the moment, there's no true market for second-hand electric vehicles. As soon as we do that by replacing the batteries or components, the market will massively increase. So I don't think they're going to come down. On the nuclear point, yes, we do need to create energy, electricity, but we also need to invest heavily in CCUS, because at the moment it takes a long time to build nuclear power stations. We have the gas already to burn. We now need to develop the CCUS properly, and that's the only way we can move forward with hydrogen.
Amer, did you want to comment on that as well?
I agree with that. Again, economies of scale is one thing. I think if we're looking at the technology, fuel cells and electrolyzers have one main problem, really. They're expensive, yeah. The materials are expensive, iridium's expensive, platinum's expensive. I think there isn't, and I agree with Alex, I think it's not about passenger vehicle market. I think that's completely borne up by EVs, and they work perfectly. And I don't even see EV fuel cell electric vehicles as competition to EVs. For some people, they just make more sense. If you've got a captive fleet which you need to be on the road all the time, you would go for a hydrogen fuel cell option. It's as simple as that. If you can't afford for the downtime in charging. I think what's missing from this whole debate is, yes, electricity is cheaper, and well, you'd hope so. But there's a missing part from the hydrogen debate and the electricity debate, and that's when we fill up our cars now, what's the bottom line? The tax. What's going to replace that from a hydrogen or a fuel cell vehicle? That's got to be answered, because that when you're trying to get investment decisions of local authorities or businesses, they recognise that is going to be an issue. So that needs to be resolved. We've got to look at this as a whole system. So the cost of the vehicle might be one thing. What are the future costs going to look like? And critically, if you're all of a sudden going to change the whole fleet that you operate, then you need to retrain all of the people that operate those fleets, because otherwise you'll be bringing people in from all over the place, and it's going to add to your cost.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more questions from the floor at this point? No? In which case, I will ask a couple of my own. At the moment, our homes are powered by electricity. We have boilers running on gas, and our cars are using petrol. There's diversity in many ways that offers resilience in its own way. On the subject of sort of energy security, do you think that hydrogen has a role to play simply by offering diversification? What would the panel's comments be on that side of things?
I would say yes, and one of the reasons, I go back to what I was saying, communist China has 73% of the world's lithium-ion batteries. Most of those minerals are mined from the DRC, which is then processed in China. Australia has a lot of the critical minerals, but they mine them, send them to China for processing, and they export them out. We need to have these homegrown technologies which we support to protect it from those assets. And we saw this happen at the start of COVID last year with PPE. 90-something% of our PPE came from China. When the going got tough, China pulled out the drawbridge and either didn't send us the contractually obliged shipments, or they sent us stuff that didn't work. Because when the going get tough, we know China will look after themselves. That's why we need to develop a homegrown market for this technology and work with our allies and partners, Australia, Canada, to develop the minerals and this technology. We cannot be reliant on energy. We always look this week what's going on with Russia and Nord Stream 2 and stuff. We need to have that energy security. It's incredibly important.
Echoing exactly the same point, really. One of the fantastic benefits of hydrogen is, and I mentioned it in my speech, is the fact you can store it. So again, don't think of this as competing technologies. The gentleman asked a question about nuclear. Absolutely, nuclear will have a role in being able to create hydrogen, just as now the huge drop in costs with renewables, whether it's solar, whether it's wind, have a huge potential to be able to, the issue that you have with renewables is intermittency. Either not working when you want them to work, hydrogen has a role there to play, or working at a time that you don't need it, you don't have the demand, and they're switched off, and we pay for that as consumers. And it's the right thing to do to encourage those renewables onto the sector, but turn those into hydrogen, keep that storage. And I mean, there are broader issues of security of supply with storage and sort of rough closing sort of in the last couple of years. But you can see a future where both nuclear and renewables are used to create hydrogen, and that hydrogen is then injected, whether it's injected into transportation or back into the gas grid. So, hugely important potential there.
I completely agree. I think I agree with everyone. God, we talked about hydrogen, but I think
consensus here, it's
we're
good.
going through this energy. We recognise we're going through this energy transition. No one technology is the answer, but Alex has nailed it. I think we have to be able to lead on this area, and I think we have so many great companies like Michaela's and other companies that have stemmed from the UK and are doing fantastic things on global projects for hydrogen fuel cells. So they need to be supported. We almost need to do for fuel cells in this regard what we've done for batteries. So we've supported them with the Faraday Challenge. We need to do the same for fuel cells. That's my view.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the audience? Thank you. Lady at the front here and gentleman at the back.
Thank you. I'm Susie from Mid Suffolk District Council. We've just last month actually converted our entire bin lorry fleet to hydro-treated vegetable oil, and which was just in time really, quite frankly, because our bin lorries only do something like 5 miles to the gallon, so we would have been in trouble. But the throughput of the hydro-treated vegetable oil is coming via the Netherlands, so that gives us a supply trouble. We recognise that we will be moving to hydrogen, and we see this as just a stopgap. But when? None of you have mentioned timing. When can I convert my bin lorries to hydrogen? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I think there was a second question at the back, and I've noted a third over in the corner there.
Thank you. Hi, Richard Royal from Equinor and the Zero Carbon Humber project. Interested in the comments you made about public acceptance and education and understanding. I think that's probably the biggest challenge that we've got. How do you think we actually try and do that and overcome some of the NIMBYism that we often encounter? And who do you think has a responsibility to lead on that?
Lovely, thank you. So we'll go with those two, and I've got one more that I'll come back to for me. Michaela, did you want to sort of come into that on the timeline front, and then we've got the public acceptance question
Yeah,
as well.
so I think the main thing is this supply and demand issue. But we know there are hydrogen bin lorries working around the world. There's no problem with that. They are a bit more expensive, and that is, yeah.
I need a rural district.
It doesn't make any difference if it's rural. So because it's got the range, because the hydrogen is topping up the battery. So what that does is extend the range of any electric. So I know electric vehicles have range issues which may not lend themselves to rural settings, but hydrogen actually eliminates that as an issue. And so if you've got any vehicle with a longer range, like HGVs, that's why they tend to be so. Hydrogen seems to be the only solution really for HGVs. It's the same with bin lorries. So there is one vehicle, I believe, coming very shortly to the UK. It's not a UK technology. It's not a UK vehicle, but it is coming to the UK. And I know probably a handful of HGV and waste truck businesses that are developing hydrogen vehicles. So I would say it is a chicken and egg. It's an investment question, but to get a vehicle at the right costs, which I expect is what you're expecting as well, I would say you could do it within 3 to 6 months if you wanted to. And you just, but these things are not being joined up at the moment. And I think one of the things about the hydrogen strategy is it sort of now allows us to get on with putting together a fuel cell strategy. Most of the hydrogen fuel cells in the UK are imported, and we can change that. That's absolutely turnaroundable. So I'd like to see that turnaround.
Richard,
yeah, so coming on a couple of those. So not transport related, but just a nod there to a fellow industrial cluster project. Our project HyNet, which is in the northwest, which is about decarbonising heavy industry that actually relies on natural gas and can't easily electrify. So hydrogen really is the only alternative that they have. That's a project that we're in at the moment, hoping to secure government funding for. That will be up and running by 2025. That will save 10 million tonnes per year of CO2, so that's about 6 million cars worth. Now that will secure jobs at places like CF Fertiliser, Jaguar Land Rover, Kellogg's, Pilkington Glass, and places like that, and help stimulate and grow that economy. So that's that's not that long. These aren't projects that we're talking about. Help fund, and we'll come back in 2030, 2040 and talk about. These are immediate, and and in that case we are just cracking on with it. Public acceptability. One of the things that we're doing is a school program, because I think very much it's not in that agenda if you're at school. And my daughter recently sort of going through GCSEs. When she's learning about energy, it's really just wind farms and solar, and there's so much more. And again, not pitting competing technologies, but we have a role to play. And I know MMU are doing a school program as well. But there are simple things as well. Having things like hydrogen buses, just socialising it, just getting it out there, so that when you're on a bus, you're not thinking about the Hindenburg, you're not thinking about the bomb, you're just thinking, I was on a hydrogen bus. We're doing a lot of trial projects. The more that we can talk about how people use it, and there aren't any changes, people then are happy to adopt it. So I think we do have that challenge, but I think we are grasping the nettle on that.
Just on that public acceptance front, I think, you can do this through a number of ways. Schools programs, one key, your children come home and talk to you about what they've learnt in school. I think public acceptance is the biggest challenge for me, and the communication aspect of this whole thing. How do we communicate about hydrogen? Within this building, 2 years ago, we did an event. We brought in a fuel cell generator, took a week's worth of risk assessments. I got in here, I was surrounded by 7 or 8 health and safety people. I had a hydrogen bottle with me, and I had my fuel cell with me. But what did that translate to? That public acceptance means that they now want to look at using that sort of setup within events. People want to power their stages with fuel cells, and we're hoping to do a number of different events. And I think as many events as you can do, it don't need to be events, but not a specialised event for hydrogen. It just needs to be included as the norm. So just wherever you can utilise the technology, and don't leave anyone behind. Bring everyone with you, whether it's the schools, should mention the clusters. I think the clusters have got a really good position here. They've got large-scale hydrogen projects, a lot of investment, a lot of skills-related requirements. We're helping to pull together all of the Northwest in almost like a consortium to work on the skills agenda. And the hydrogen strategy, completely helps. All of the information, but if you look at the government's Green Job Task Force report, one of the largest things that come out of that is the communication is the biggest problem. So just talk about it as if it's normal. It doesn't need a specialist, theatre to talk about hydrogen. We just talk about it as it is going to be the part of our future.
On the public acceptance, I slightly disagree with quite a lot of the panel, and I say let's stop talking about it. The last thing we want to do is talk about this new fancy technology that goes in your cars, and talk about electrolyzers and talk about fuel. No, public doesn't care. Public shouldn't care. What the public wants to know is, can my journey be quicker, cleaner, more efficient? That's all you're talking about. Stop talking about this sort of language like we're talking. Don't have these events to make it sound like this wonder technology, or this technology, we all know it is. But all this, just say, well, this car going to go X hundred miles, it's going to cost you this amount of money, and it's very clean for the environment. That's what you talk about. My pipes are going to, be cleaner, less carbon. Fine. It's going to be less emissions from the car factory. We should be talking more about what comes out of the tailpipe in terms of pollution. And poisonous pollution, especially inside schools. That's what we're talking about. The last thing we're talking about is fuel cells. No one cares. Really, they don't. We just need to make it accepted as just a normal thing. But as soon as we start talking about it as a unique, special thing, people start talking about the Hindenburg and H-bomb, and suddenly they think, I've heard this hydrogen thing, this is all evil. But no, it's just taking technology. Most people have mobile phones nowadays, We didn't even like 10, 15 years ago, most people didn't have phones. But it's just accepted because it's better. If we sell, frankly, net zero across the board, whether it's hydrogen or anything else, as you're going to have a better quality of life, whether it's cheaper, whether it's cleaner, or whatever, people like that. They don't want to get involved in technology. That's boring. They'd rather watch the football.
Just one point. I actually really agree with that. And the thing is, when you show people a product, that's it. You don't need to talk about anything. So you show them the products, but you have to get the products out there. That is the key. That's where that's where the work is at the moment. That's the bottleneck. And so what does it take to get the products out there? It takes investment. It takes good regulation, and that's critical. And then it develops. You need to develop the supply chains. Now, we're part of those supply chains, and many of the people on this panel are. So those people are there. That they can. So there's just work to be done on getting the products into people's hands, I think, at this point.
Lovely. Thank you very much for those answers. Gentleman with the mic.
Thank you. Oh, yes, you can hear me. Michael Cooper, I'm on Tandis District Council. I've enjoyed hearing all that's been said. It's wonderful. What seems to me to be lacking is the fact that the government isn't getting on with this. We keep hearing about we need to go green, we need to do this, and great statement. But in reality, unfortunately, what we've heard today is that actually all the stuff is there. 100 years, I think Michaela was saying. And that's great. And why isn't the government doing something about it? One thing that really worried me, Alexandra, is you said, oh yes, okay, you talked about Betamax and VHS. Betamax lost because it was one company pushing it. VHS was lots of companies. So when you're talking about electric cars, the government's pushing this at the moment. If you actually go and you've got vehicles, heavy vehicles, that are needing hydrogen gas to be supplied to them, and that gas supply chain is now across all of the garages in the UK, then I think you'll find, like Michaela, I'm with you there, I don't want a car that's going to run out after a couple hundred miles. I want a car that I can do 500 miles in it, because that's the sort of thing that one would use in the UK. So I'm just asking, Alexandra, can you get the government to start pushing this out there and doing something?
Yes, the answer is yes. And we have the hydrogen strategy, which is a bit delayed, admittedly, but it got there eventually. And we still have, I still think we are in the vanguard. We are not as far ahead as we could have been last year, and the hydrogen strategy was very delayed. But we are getting there. I think government is doing it. But let's be honest, governments are naturally cautious. They are naturally cautious about putting their foot forward when there's a chance of failure, chance of investment. And that's why I go back to my analogy with the vaccine rollout. The government had to go forward. They had to back failures, and they knew they were going to fail. And we just need the government and the public to accept, actually, we don't know the final, the ultimate income when it comes to net zero. But if we back this, especially when working with the industry, and the industry needs to have a key part in this and say, we can do this, then we can do it. But we can get there. We just need something a bit more pushing, which is why meetings like this are so important, so the government realises people care about it.
Excellent. Michaela, did you want to comment?
Yeah, just a couple of points. We've been saying follow the science for the last couple of years during COVID. I think we need to follow the science also on technologies, and that what that really means is we need to be incorporating more scientific and engineering expertise into policy making, because clearly there is a disconnect, and in the UK I think it's more extreme than in other countries where these technologies have been successful. So I would really try to encourage people to communicate better in that sense. But yet there's no reason why these things can't get out. They need to.
Lovely. Okay, I've got a few questions coming through from online as well. Tom has asked, how soon will we see hydrogen-powered flight in the UK on a commercial scale? We haven't had anything on aviation yet, so maybe that's another theme. And Jessica has asked, doesn't the minuscule number of FCEVs, so that's fuel cell electric vehicles on the market, show that even manufacturers don't see a future in hydrogen passenger vehicles? And I would add a stat that I'm aware of here that is something along the lines of there are about 3 hydrogen car models on the market versus 130 electric cars. So perhaps the panel could pick up on that one.
Just very briefly on passenger vehicles, as I said, I think that we've lost that battle already. So in fact, I think that's the future. On aviation, I think there is hydrogen-powered planes, and I was meant to go and ride in one a few months ago, but it crashed literally the week before I was going on it. And I looked at the image of the crash. Apparently it was a pilot error or something. And I looked at it, and I could not believe it. It looked like, I'm not an aviation expert, I will picture the crash. It's like a turboprop plane, which, first of all, how disappointing. I expected some sort of spacecraft for the future, but then I realised actually it's just a normal sort of plane with a different engine. So I think if you can start putting into aviation, the better. And I think at the moment, the only other game in town for aviation is maybe sustainable aviation fuel, sort of basic biofuels, as we heard before, garbage trucks. But then biofuels have a lot more other issues as well. So I think hydrogen will be the only answer in the next few years. But I don't think we're anywhere near that time soon.
Anna?
Yeah, just on the aviation front, I think, like Sue's right, Airbus, BAE systems, they've all developed, they've all got hydrogen fuel cell planes in R&D and various different stages. But on a practical level, I think the airports are quite key here, because the airports have the opportunity, they see the future of aviation as hydrogen as one solution, so they can gear themselves up. So if you look at Manchester Airport, There's a circa 1,000 vehicles that never leave the airport boundary. There's auxiliary power in terms of diesel gensets. That's the opportunity right now. So that creates the market. So if we look at a hydrogen refueling station at the airport as an example, that's the airport gearing itself up, whether it's for heat requirement or transport requirement. But then you've got multiple, they're almost saying to the aviation industry, look, we recognise that you are going to make hydrogen fuel cell planes, so we're gearing up and we're achieving our net zero ambitions on our localised estimate, because the aviation emissions aren't the airport's problem, they're the airline's problem in their view.
Any other comments or questions at this moment in time? So another one from myself. So as I understand it, there's a draft of the heat and building strategy that suggests that the government recognises that there's a need to end the difference in cost between electricity and gas for consumers. Essentially, electricity is greener than gas, but the levies earn, I think, about 5 billion for the government on electricity, but nothing on gas. Do you think that that a levy on gas should be introduced, and would you envisage this as being beneficial for promoting the uptake of hydrogen as a fuel as well? We've also got a question, another question online, which is how much more does it cost to heat your home with hydrogen? It's a fairly direct question. Either of those, would the panel like to pick up on either of those?
On the cost stuff, first of all, I'm a conservative, so all levies are bad levies. We don't want to increase that. On the cost of heating homes, it really depends on the home. It sounds like cop-out, and that goes back to what we were saying about there's no going to be one solution. So at some places, heat pumps will be far better. In some sense, you might have some sort of biofuels to heat your homes, because it really depends. If you're retrofitting, if it's a modern home, it would be relatively cheap. Obviously, we've seen if you're burning fossil fuels, and we're seeing the price of gas at the moment, suddenly there's an extra cost on it that goes down. Once we're on fully green hydrogen, the cost will come down. So it's a weird cop-out answer, but it does depend on your type of home and what the situation.
I'll steal that cop-out phrase as well. No, I think you're right. And one of the difficulties with sort of being pressed up against the wall and how much what it costs is we really don't know. You know, the market isn't there yet. So develop that market, develop those producers, and the cost will come down, whether that's in hydrogen cars or hydrogen boilers or the fuel that goes into your home. So it's very difficult. And again, it's probably worth framing the debate back, which is to say, you know, we've had relatively, until recently, cheap energy. Now to hit net zero, we are going to have to spend more, and it's going to cost more. But let's do it in the least disruptive, most cost-effective way. And as Alex said, if we can do it in a way that actually generates income from this country, then that's a virtuous circle.
And just one more on the costs. You have to look at the whole cost. So if you're looking at paying a heat pump to a hydrogen boiler, if you're putting in a hydrogen boiler that costs £2,500, or if your heat pump costs £18,000, that's a lot of extra energy you have to burn to make a saving. So once again, it really depends where you do it. And if you're putting 20% in the pipes already, suddenly you're not putting the extra costs onto the network, and so it's cheaper that way. So it does depend.
Amar, do you want to comment
Just
as
a very
well?
simple point on scale. I think scale brings down the cost. We've seen it happen with wind, we've seen it happen with PV, and the same will probably happen with hydrogen.
Any other questions at this point? In which case, I might sort of round off with a final comment from the panel, but also one more question, and that's if we are powering 3 million homes by 2030, are we on trajectory to provide for the 27.8 million households that existed in the UK in 2020? I mean, obviously, hydrogen is part of the solution, but what does the panel feel in terms of acceleration would be needed to unlock that? And I suppose the sort of question that I would put to you all as a panel is, what would be on your wish list of things to change for the industry in the sort of short term to try and bring this agenda forward at faster pace?
Yeah,
Michaela?
happy to take that. Yes, so coordination of the technology as well as the fuel. I think that's really important in the UK, so I'd like to see better coordination. The regions working together, we know that the regions have complementary strengths and they should be working together. And again, that management and coordination will support that. So, for example, renewables in Scotland and Humber, and then manufacturing in the Midlands. And so that better coordination for me is optimal. Getting a level playing field in terms of economics, in terms of each of the technologies. the one issue with nuclear power is it's actually increasing in cost. It's one of the few energy sources that is increasing in cost. Renewables is plummeting. Fuel cells and hydrogen is also dropping. So I'd really like to level the playing fields in terms of cost. There's a significant spend in the UK on nuclear today. It's about 1,000 times less on fuel cell and hydrogen technology. So I think we need to level the playing field up in terms of public funding. And finally, inclusion. For me, bringing diversity of thought and talent into this conversation is absolutely critical, and international collaboration. Thank you.
Emma?
Well, I'm going to focus on the business aspect. So I think there's a massive opportunity for UK businesses to recognise the role of hydrogen fuel cells and get involved. I think if you look at the hydrogen economy and where it could be split up, we're talking about where we focus on fuel cells, electrolyzers, but the whole hydrogen economy is going to be quite large. And I think that's ready, as Alex mentioned, we want to be a leader in this area, and that's the only way this happens. So we want UK businesses, and it's not a case of UK businesses are not going to be supported. There's technology centres like we have that have the equipment that businesses can come and use and develop their products and get them to market. So it's almost an ask for UK businesses to get involved and recognise what the hydrogen opportunity brings for them.
Yeah, business is going to be key for this getting this off the market. But one other thing we need to invest more heavily in the research is CCUS. If we're going to get to green hydrogen and blue hydrogen, we need to develop CCS offering, which we don't frankly have at the moment. It's not scalable at the moment. We haven't got the costs down. The government needs to focus on that, because once we unlock carbon capture and storage, then we can actually have a proper conversation about the environmental benefits of hydrogen.
And that's a really interesting point here. One of the, I'm probably focusing on things like heat and building strategy. I've mentioned blending. Blending's a really simple thing to do. Mandate blending, 20% into the gas network tomorrow. You'd kickstart the hydrogen economy in this country. You'd kickstart the development of a fabulous sort of sector. And relatively simple to do, with very simple policy levers and interventions. We're ready, we can do it, we've proved it'll work. Again, government seeing a range of solutions. So, we'll often fall into the trap of sort of comparing hydrogen with heat pumps or electricity. You are going to need a mixed bag, a mixed ecosystem of energy solutions going forward. So, to not closing the door to any of those rather than picking a winner. I think we're in danger sometimes with things like sort of levies and interventions of sending the wrong signal, actually. And then my last one, I'm picking up on Alex's point about CCUS. And Cadent are very much involved in this at the moment. I've talked about the project HyNet. We're in competition with other regions and other sectors on that. We talk about levelling up, and as a sort of conservative principle, it's at the heart of I think probably most people in this room. But it's important to level up and not skew up. Focus on actually facilitating all of those industrial clusters. Competition is just inequitable in this situation. We're ready to go. The whole country needs it. So deploying at scale, supporting those, and as Alex said, kickstarting that sort of CCUS element to it will be vitally important.
Excellent, thank you. So, we've covered a lot of different ground today. So skills, scale, education, timelines, where the investment is needed most, and this sort of requirement for a diversity of thought, but also a diversity of different solutions as well. So hopefully today has helped with demystifying some of this debate. That brings us to the end of this panel. So thank you very much to our panellists. If you would like to know more about Bright Blue or become a member, please do sign up with our team at the back. We're offering membership for just £10 if you join during Party Conference. And our next event is just in an hour, levelling up work employment rights in the 2020s, Britain with the TUC, and that's in Exchange 1 just next door. So many thanks to our expert panel for joining us, and to our supporter Cadent, and to everyone for their questions.